Okay, in the last video we looked at some of the data manipulations you could do in Tableau Prep. We were checking out things from this drop-down list here, the add step, and we did add pivot. So we're going to hit 3 more of those in this video, and I'm going to start with add aggregate. So this aggregate thing here actually has there's a similar idea that happens in Tableau Desktop. Whenever we want to group by some category in the data and then do an analysis on it. The difference is when we do it here, it's a little more permanent. So we're actually going to output a new data set that is potentially grouped in a different way. As an example, let's look down here. So maybe I don't care about all of the products. I just care about the plants. Let's say I want a data table. In real life, I may have a lot more plants than this, and so I just want an daily output at the plant level instead of the product level. Right now, it thinks that product plant ID is a measure, but that's okay. I can still drag it over to this grouped fields part right here. So this is similar to in Tableau Desktop when I drag over to columns or to rows. It's setting it up to do whatever analysis I want to do on plant 1 and plant 2 separately. And so the other one that I care about is daily yield. I don't want to group by daily yield. In other words, I don't want a different group for every distinct value of daily yield. Instead, that's the field that I'd like to aggregate. So I'm going to drag it over to aggregated fields, and now notice what happens. For plant ID 1, I have 805. That's summing up the yield for product 101 and the yield for product 102. Similarly, for 2, I summed things up. So now I have one number for each plant. And now this, again, when I run the flow, it's going to change the way the data looks. So it's going to output, there were 4 rows before, now I'm outputting a different data set with 2 rows, and I could, if I wanted to, save it onto my computer. Again, since I'm just illustrating things, I'm going to remove this step. I don't actually want to keep that step, but just so you know, the aggregate is a useful step. The next one that I'm going to do is a join. So conceptually, joins are when there's kind of one column that's in common between 2 different data sets, and I want to kind of match up the values in that column to join the data sets together. So I'm going to do this. Actually, first let's take a look at what we're dealing with. So we're pretty familiar with this products data. Let's remind ourselves what's in the plant data. So in the plant data, I have this plant ID field. And then this tells me which types of welding machine are in each plant. So notice here that this plant ID is analogous to this prod plant ID here, 1 and 2, and I have this 1, 2, and then a few more over here. So I could click add join. I'm going to do it in a little different way. I'm actually going to grab this and drag it up over here. And notice now it gives me 2 options. I'm going to drag it to the join option. And then automatically it will set up my 2 data sources that are going to be joined together. Now notice Tableau is pretty smart, and even though the fields are not named the same, it's decided that, hey, the values match up, the names are similar. And so I think that the field that we should join on is this plant ID. So in the blue data set, it's called plant ID. In the yellowish data set, it's called prod plant ID here, but it's decided that those are analogous, and it's going to try to match values there. If that wasn't the case, sometimes you have to add it manually, in which case you can just click add, and then I know plant ID is for the prep example plants, and prod plant ID is over here. And now I have the same thing again. I can do it manually as well. So what is this showing us? It's saying, okay, both tables have information about plants 1 and 2, and so the values are shown in black. This plants one also has some extra info. It has info about the welding machines in plants 3, 4, and 5. That doesn't show up in my products table. And so what that means is there are some options for joins. And we'll talk about that in just a second, but let's take a look at kind of what this is going to result in. So after I join it, now instead of 2 data sets, 1, 2, I'm going to have 1, and ideally it contains the info from both data sets. So notice there's color coding here. So from the bottom yellow data set, I have this product ID field, daily yield, and date, and prod plant ID. And then additionally, in the new data set, I'm not only going to have these yellow ones, but from the blue data set, I'm also going to pick up a duplicate column of plant ID, which I'll delete in a minute, and then also the welding machine data. So now I have it all, and you can see it again also down here. I have this all together in one data set. And the reason I can do that is because I matched up the values from this prod plant ID in one data set and this plant ID in the other data set. Now, in some cases, I may not want to lose the data about plants 3, 4, and 5. And in that case, I'm going to come over here to this little join type. So right now it says inner join. That means whenever anything doesn't match, I'm just going to drop it on either side. But notice here on the left-hand table, there are some values that I may or may not want to drop. Let's say that I want to keep them. I'll go and click on this part of the Venn diagram here. And now notice they're still red, but in my example output, now I've kept them. So I have a row for ID 3 and 4 and 5, and I haven't lost the welding machine type information here. But since there's no matches, I just have null for all of these yellow fields that come from the yellow data set. And that's the best that the join can do. The advantage is it saves this information, the welding machine type, over here. Since I'm primarily concerned with the daily yields in this example, I'm just going to go ahead and do an inner join. So watch carefully the data, the snapshot over here. When I take this away, notice those 3 unmatched values, the 3, 4, and 5, go away. And instead we're going to output this. So that's the difference between an inner join and a left join in this case. There's also 2 other kinds of joins. I can do a right join. I can do a full join. In this case, there's not as much of a difference between those other 2 and the ones that we already did. But let's say that the product data set had information about plant 6, for example, which is not included in the plants data set. Then I would actually have 4 separate ways I could join the data. Okay, so that's kind of the mechanics and a little bit of the idea of what's going on in the join. So we have one more step that I'd like to do. Now we've joined these 2 data pieces. The last part of this flow is I'm going to add an output. And what that's going to do is basically save the final product. And so notice I can save it to a file. I can also, if I'm connected to Tableau online, I could publish it as a data source over there. We're just going to save it to a file. There's a special Tableau file extension .hyper. For now, I'm just going to do this plain old CSV file, which you can always choose to do. And then it'll tell me, then it'll pull up this navigational file explorer here and ask me where I want to save it, and I can change the name. So let's say I want to call it product and plant data.csv. I'm just going to accept the default. This is some kind of a Tableau repository folder that it's set up on my computer when Tableau was installed. And I'm going to hit accept. And now notice it's got the name here, it's got the type, it's got the location. And at the bottom of this output, I have this green button called Run Flow. Notice also that this button, which was grayed out before, is now available. And this will do a similar thing. So I'm going to click this. Actually, I'm going to click this button up here, Run All Flows. And since the data was so small, it's already done. Sometimes this will take a few seconds, up to a minute or 2, if you're using large data sources. I'm going to hit done. And now, if I go back to that data sources file on my computer, I should have a file that says prod and plant data.csv, and it should look exactly like this, with these specific columns. And so what we did along the way was we started with 2 data sets, we pivoted one, and then we joined them, and now we saved our output. And that is an example of Tableau prep. So if you want to save this sequence, which I suggest you do so that you can submit it as part of your assignment, you can actually save the sequence to your computer as well, and it'll be this .tfl file. All right, that's it. Thank you.